And so today we're going to talk about how to basically avoid building the wrong thing 2 weeks at a time, which is kind of what I call Agile for the most part, or Scrum, when it's kind of abused. This is the journey I'm going to take you on, hopefully within the next 45, 50 minutes, something like that. I'll do a quick intro and for specific reasons that I'll explain. Then we'll jump into why folks are changing the way that we're working. So for me, the last 5 years or so, I've been working on transformation activities at large enterprises. So Target and US Bank is my current employer. So we'll just talk about how those organizations, as well as others, are trying to change how we're working from old ways to new ways. We'll take a look at some symptoms of transformation pain points, basically. This stuff never goes smoothly. It's not fast. So we'll just kind of highlight some of the stuff, hopefully that you've already seen. Actually, hopefully you don't see, but if you do, I can help you a little bit. Then we'll talk about overcoming some of those symptoms, and then I'll hopefully do a little challenge for you individually to keep learning. So first of all, me. As I just said, I've been at Target. I'm at the bank right now. I've got about a 25-year career in technology as a business analyst, a project manager, a program manager, all those types of things. And then the last 5 years or so, I kind of found product, and it's basically kind of a spiritual experience for me. I'm a passionate dude around products, primarily because I truly believe that it resolves a lot of the issues that we've had for years and years and years in software development if we do it well and if we collaborate well. And so the rest of this stuff on here is obviously kind of an unprofessional intro, but it's part of the reason I do this is because I don't consider myself some big expert on product. I don't consider myself an expert in transformation. I consider myself somebody that is a pretty average dude that's had a lot of experiences that I've either stumbled into, some of which I've tried to orchestrate. But my goal today is nothing more than to share some of these stories and hope that they land with you on one or two things that can help you guys move the needle in your individual companies. So the quick fly through, great adorable family. I don't know who their father is because I don't know where that red hair came from, other than mom. But when Jacob came out of the womb, I looked to my wife and asked a couple questions. But I was an art major in college, so that thing on the bottom left is pottery, actually, with little individual letters, which tells you that I'm anal retentive and OCD. I've got a great collection of T-shirts. The Divinity of Jeff Goldblum is my current favorite. I only buy crap I can afford to pay with cash, so I own a used police interceptor, a Ford Explorer, which is by far my favorite vehicle in the world. And I have yet to figure out how to hold a fish properly, because we just started fishing as a family the last year or so. So don't mock me too much. Northern have teeth that would have hurt if I would have put my finger in there. And that cabin is in Wisconsin, and so I proudly declare that I am a Crowbar regular in the Webster, Wisconsin. So if you ever want a product management workshop over a beer next to a lot of Packer fans, come with me. We'll hang out at the Crow, and we'll talk product. Let's see here. Next up. So why are folks doing this stuff? So that's me. Hopefully we learned something today. Why are folks doing stuff? 2016, San Francisco, Mind the Product. Des Traynor, thank you, co-founder of Intercom, got up and talked at the end of this full day of product management presentations that were all energizing. He got up and basically said, all of your products are out of date and you're screwed. So have a good day, peace out. He basically said, any of us in this room in 30 minutes could incorporate, stand up a website, and same-day delivery within about 30 minutes. So the ecosystem that we have for technology is such that everybody's at risk of being disrupted. So when I was at Target, the ominous risk was Amazon and other folks that were changing how retail was done and kind of eating our lunch. At the bank, I think banks in general have felt kind of safe for a long time. Hey, we're this big stable thing, kind of like VHS tapes, and basically we're going to be here and it will just continue on. And we've got regulatory compliance issues, so people can't just come in and compete against us because there's so much challenge. Since I've changed jobs, I've been looking at PricewaterhouseCoopers stuff and Deloitte stuff, all the big six kind of research on financial stuff. And it's obvious that regulatory issues will become a commodity at some point, like tackling regulatory issues will become commodity. And as soon as it does, experience will be the king of these types of services. And so even you're starting to see even little things starting like with the Apple Card. I was blown away by some of just the basic concepts that they have. They'll basically take a card and, hey, I gave it to somebody that I kind of don't trust after I gave it to them. So I've got a button on my phone I can hit and actually regenerate a new credit card number so that that other one can never be used again. Super simple, like conceptually super simple, but really powerful differences between current state and what the future could look like. So long story short, we're changing because we got to stay alive. And then everybody that's changing how they work have like 3 specific things that they always talk about. Doesn't matter who you talk to, it's almost always the same. I want to go faster. I want to be innovative. And I need business outcomes of some sort, which is great. But the default solution that we always seem to land on is, quote unquote, an Agile Transformation or Scrum. And so version 1 has their study every year on the state of Agile. From 2007 to 2000, looks like 17 or 18 now, we've gone from less than a third of the folks using Agile practices to virtually everybody, and it's kind of the new norm. And just like the old norm, the new norm can be desperately abused in all kinds of ways. And so the spoiler alert at the bottom there is that this might not end well, and ultimately, it's not the framework's fault. So I am not somebody that's bashing Scrum or Agile or certainly not DevOps, because at the end of the day, you guys are the mechanism or the engine to actually get stuff out there in a more quick fashion, basically, and a safer fashion when it's all said and done. So knowing that this isn't necessarily a solution if we don't change our mindset, we've got all kinds. This is my Eeyore slide because it's super sad and it's what I live with every day. Basically, we end up with organizations that are trying to deliver differently, hence the deliver 2 weeks, the wrong thing 2 weeks at a time, but we're still doing old school ways of managing everything. And so I want to make sure I manage or I fund projects annually. I want to make sure that each of those projects has a finite list of scope and it's very clear exactly what you need to go deliver. I want to have bloated teams with territorial issues and people fighting about how to make decisions. I'll just make up some new roles because there's only 3 or 4 in that new framework that we have, and that can't possibly be enough. And then I'm going to, because I've done checklists all my life, especially in financial services, right? I'm going to basically make sure that I've got a new checklist to manage as we go forward. And then I'm going to make sure that I immediately try to make it global. I'm going to try to scale something that I don't know how to do, which all of these things are symptoms that I see from day to day, both at current employer and in other places where I've networked and so on. So as any conference goer would want, you want the silver bullets for all these problems, and I've provided them for you in the following slides, or not. There is no silver bullet, you guys know that. But product for me is one of the things, as I said earlier, that's foundational to unlock the real value of changing the way that we work. And so for me, I partnered with David Hussman, a gentleman that co-founded DevJam in Minneapolis to train some folks at Target. And we tried to create curriculum that matched both the product side of the house and the engineering side of the house and tried to just bring them into a single room, essentially, and stop talking about different parts of the house. And so David always quoted or kind of generated this definition of product, which is basically the thing that we create that adds value for our customer. And I love the definition because I'm basically a 4th grader at heart, and it's pretty simple. And it stopped people from getting wrapped around the axle on, am I a product, am I a service, am I a platform? I mean, they're all unique considerations with those things, but that's not the point at the end of the day. From a mindset perspective, I want people thinking about their customer and what they're actually building. And so the implications, according to Pete, are that this actually implies that I know who my customers are, I know what they value, and I know how I fit into their larger world. There isn't anybody out here that just uses a single product to do their day job or to do anything at home, so on and so forth. There's a larger ecosystem that we sit in. And then the big emphasis is that the we is truly a cross-functional team. This is no longer, in my BA days, I'd sit down and create my 100-page BRD and have somebody sign off on it in blood and then make sure that I can take one of their children each time they try to change something. And then I would hand it over to the technology world to go build, and then I'd come back and test it and tell them we did it wrong. And this is basically saying I want to co-create across these roles because that's the only way that we will actually create solid solutions. And so as we go forward, for me, a lot of the stuff that I do from day to day to help people work differently is all about mindset. And this slide is one, I could easily, like anybody about Agile, you can go out and find a manifesto and values and principles, and it's a standard thing across the industry. When I was trying to find those things when I was first learning about product, I couldn't find anything. Maybe they exist and I'm bad at Googling, but I couldn't come up with it. So I started making my own based on what I was seeing in some of the teams that were operating well. And the one that I put dead center is humility. And that's part of the reason the title had the something about humility in it. But basically the bottom line here is that I am now at a spot personally and professionally where I assume I'm wrong to start. And Microsoft did a study in 2009 where they studied a slew of different changes that they made to their platforms. And about a third of them moved the needle the way that you would expect. About a third of them fell flat. And about a third of them actually went backwards away from the goals that they had. And so with that in mind, it's actually a really empowering concept if you can totally internalize it. Because all of a sudden now I'm in a different spot. If I assume I'm wrong, all of my behaviors change. I interact with people differently. I research things differently. I don't go build something just because I think it's a good idea, because I assume that even my best ideas are only right a third of the time. And then ultimately, I probably celebrate more when I succeed because, oh, thank God, I'm an idiot, but I still did something well. The first three of these things basically are the other values that I see kind of grouped together, and that kind of I have empathy for my customer. I am curious and I'm passionate about what we do, and I want everybody, regardless of role, to be there in that space. And then ultimately, on the tail end is when it comes to delivery. Let's have a bias toward action. Let's experiment, actually test something out as opposed to just talking about it over and over again. Have some fun doing this stuff. When I was at Target, we always joked about the fact that we sell socks. Like, this ain't rocket science. Like, maybe at the bank you could say, you're playing with my money, you better be careful. But ultimately, you could still have fun in what we're doing. And honestly, half of my meetings are, like every now and again, I'll just swear just to kind of toss out a little landmine in there and go, like, I'm human, like you're human, it's okay, we can be bad, we can be happy, we can have fun with this stuff, we can make fun of how we do what we do. And then this team first thing is huge when we start thinking about changing the way that we work. The bank probably has 5 different business lines, all of which have their own goals and view things separately, but they share customers across them. And so when you start thinking from a product perspective, instead of just what software are we generating or what products do we give and what do we want to sell to them, when I think about it from a customer's angle, all of a sudden my behavior also changes in that, hey, what if we created customer experiences that were consistent across our business lines that share the same customer? What if we're actually proactive in thinking about what it feels like to be them as opposed to just saying, hey, I want to sell more stuff? Honestly, and that's like the Wells story, right? The Wells Fargo, I don't know if you heard about that one a year or two ago, where basically they had incented their bankers to sell a certain number of products, basically, get more wallet share. And the outcome of that, without actually having them focus on the actual need of the customer, was to open accounts that literally they didn't need and didn't know about. Kind of a neat way to do business. They paid for it a bit in the marketplace, and they will continue to pay for it. But it's, to me, this kind of mindset would stop things like that from happening. So some new ways of working. I'm not going to drain this in gory detail, but I do just want to cover it at a high level. Whenever we're trying to change how people are working, we have to give them something to grab onto. And so this is basically something that it's a slightly changed version of something that I did at Target, where I co-wrote this thing that we called the product playbook. And we just tried to be able to land kind of a minimum viable product owner is what was my goal for this thing. And the audience for this was a group of Agile and product coaches and some software engineering coaches as well, who basically brought these new ways of working to the organization. And the purpose behind it was to really drive a consistent vocabulary and nomenclature, so that everybody, when we were at a different part of the development life cycle, we understood what we were talking about, and everybody could talk the same language regardless of role. It ended up being used by folks far beyond those coaching teams. We had folks, we had about 500 unique visits a month, about 250 unique users a month, or I should say 500 visits, 250 unique users. And it became a resource for people to, hey, I was coached, now I'm forgetting what Pete was talking about when we were working on personas. let's go back and take a look at it. So this thing was basically a clickable system that you could kind of click into and be able to see an abstract of what each of these things were, and you get some basics on why do I do it, how do I do it, who does it, when do I do it, et cetera. So that's the playbook as a whole. We're doing something similar but different at the bank. But definition really hasn't changed a whole lot over time, right? Whether we're defining a project or a product, we got to figure out why we're here, who we're serving, how we're going to measure success, and then hopefully some ideas around what we're going to actually go build. Old world, those ideas, and on here I've got it listed as an idea backlog, and in the old world, those were prescriptive things. We said we're going to go ahead and deliver this stuff, and we're going to do it by said date, and come hell or high water, we're going to do it, and then we're going to hand it off to somebody else to support. New world, I want to treat every one of those concepts as an idea because we're humble and we're wrong 2/3 of the time. So I want this discovery life cycle to take place where I'm going to take an idea, I'm going to challenge my idea. I'm not trying to justify it, I'm trying to challenge it and be able to see whether or not I'm actually headed down the right path. And there are a bunch of different tools that we use, and I'll share a couple of them with you today as well. We'll talk about the opportunity canvas in a little bit. But basically, all I'm doing is quickly proving or disproving my hypothesis on those ideas. And if it's not right, I trash the idea. I would love to see organizations, including my own, tracking the percentage of items that we are killing from sprint to sprint. Because ultimately, that tells you whether or not you're doing discovery work. If every idea I ever have shows up in a delivery backlog, I'm probably not doing discovery. And if 75% of the ideas that I thought of show up in the delivery backlog, I'm probably not doing discovery well. And so ultimately, this to me is what unlocks a lot of the capabilities that we're trying to do with Scrum and with DevOps and so on. The OKRs that are up front, how many of you guys are trying to use OKRs from day to day in your worlds? So not too many, so 20, 30%, somewhere in there, maybe a little bit more than that. OKRs, basically objectives and key results. We'll talk about those in a little bit as well. If I do a good job of figuring out what a feature should be resulting in, so what business metric it should move when I implement it and put it in production, by the time I actually go through the delivery life cycle and work through all the technical tactics that you guys have to jump through to make stuff happen, on the tail end, I should be able to measure it and be able to say what were the technical impacts of this thing and what are the business impacts of this thing. And that's really what all the assessment is down on the bottom there. As I learn, I want to be able to feed it back into discovery, and I want to feed it back into new ideas for my idea backlog and kind of keep trucking from there. So this stuff has all been kind of the big pie-in-the-sky product view, right? Those are the philosophies that I'm trying to drive when I'm trying to change how we're thinking about the work that we do. So these next few slides are going to be focused on trying to make it real for you guys and trying to make basically how to tackle some of those symptoms that we had earlier, right? So we had the control freak thing, or just kind of this control orientation of organizations. And so show me the money is basically where I start with anything around these processes, right? For me at the bank, I can tell you right now that this is the number one priority that I have with working with senior leadership in the organization is we need to shift from funding projects to funding people. And if we can do a decent job of articulating the enterprise strategies that we have as an organization and be able to tie them back down to the business capabilities that we are aligned to as teams, all of a sudden I can always work on the most important things without having to worry about, actually I can work on the most important things basically without worrying about a prescriptive backlog of items. And so the reason it's so important for me, at least from my perspective, to shift, and Target did this, and they did it really well, was that they really are competing mindsets. Because the old world, if I'm trying to do a project that is time-boxed, prescriptive, so on and so on, it's an anti-pattern to everything else that we're trying to stand up. So you can't have the foundational thing that provides you with the resources to do the job completely contradicting with everything that we're teaching people to do from day to day in their jobs and how they have to think. Because they're constantly torn in two. You get people excited about the new ways of working and they say, yes, that would be so awesome if the stuff that we did actually added value. And then they go back and their boss is telling them, no, just do these 15 features by August 1st or you're in trouble. So this one is key, and it provides, obviously, it requires absolute understanding from senior leadership in the organization. And at Target, we were empowered to go talk to whoever we wanted to talk to. So at one point, I was in the CFO's office with all of her direct reports and all her VPs talking through, this is the mindset that we have to shift to. I'm not responsible for changing how Target did that. They had an awesome, and still do have an awesome CIO named Mike McNamara, who is as decisive as they come, and also as impactful as they come. And he helped drive this with the technology finance organization to change how we worked. And it was, if you don't have a CIO that's in that space, it will take you a long time to make this change. But it's absolutely essential as far as I'm concerned. These types of things, I think you've probably heard in different forums, so I apologize that they're kind of a high-level description, but basically a big emphasis on skills over roles. For me, I come into the bank and I see 5 different types of analysts, and they've like taken an engineering role and broken it up into 6 different components. And so you try to build a team and you end up with 15 people in the room, probably 8 of which don't really need to be there. If you had folks that understood how to do their full job. But ultimately, at the beginning, you may have to have some of those bloated teams just focused on skills and have a North Star that you're shooting toward narrowing the teams down. And that's exactly what they're doing there. And looking at enterprise over your local team, that's a huge one. We're in natural silos. Even if I'm in a product model, and I don't have slides in hindsight, I should have given you guys a product org structure slide. I'll try to explain it just so you've got some context. But the way that we're starting to organize around the bank and the way that we did organize at Target was within a portfolio. So let's say for retail, we'll just say merchandising. So basically the folks that figure out what products are going to be in the store. And then we had product groups that were a subset of merchandising. So that could be anything from buying to transportation to space and presentation, so how the stuff actually looks in the store itself on the shelves and so on. There's a bunch of software that drives that. And then there were products within those product groups that were also a subset of that. But all the things that when we describe a product, we're really describing a business capability. And so we're abstracting the technology from what the technology does. And it's a super, super key distinction because it unlocks the ability to actually have strategic points of view on where we're going to take a specific capability for the company. So the best example that I've got from my Target history was a gentleman that stood up. He was a product director, which basically just meant he had a bunch of different product teams beneath him. And when we first went to the new model, he had 120 solutions, so software solutions, that were in his portfolio because Target for 25, 30 years had accidental architecture. They just basically bought crap to fit a specific need, or they built something to fit a specific need, and they tried to figure out how to piece it all together. And there's a lot of companies that have done that over the years. The first 9 months of his product career were nothing more than rationalizing that portfolio and killing applications. There were like no new features built when they first stood up that team. But what he was trying to get to is to a place where they could say, where do I need to take signage for the store? Like in today's world, that means you've got some software systems that print out little labels that go on the shelf. In the future, that'll be technology that's probably controlled from an office, and the shelves themselves will already have the signage stuff built into them. And so in the future, he's going to have a totally different tech stack. And so his team dynamics are going to change, and the importance of that particular capability could also spike and fall over time, depending upon what the enterprise strategies are at the time. And so by separating the technology from the product or the business capability, it unleashes all kinds of freedom, basically. And so the reason I'm talking about all that within this context of enterprise is that if I've got an enterprise strategy, I can look across all those capabilities and say, which of these things are going to light up in order for me to accomplish this strategy? So one of the strategies for Target, it was all around making, they called it localization at the time. It was when you walk into your local Target store, you want it to feel like it's your Target store. So if I'm walking into one in Des Moines, I'm going to have the Barnstormers stuff in the sports section instead of my stuff where I walk in and get the Twins and unfortunately the Vikings. I'm a Packer fan in my local store. And so if you think about that, it's actually a big deal because in the past Target had three or four footprints for their stores, and they had the same products on all the same shelves in all those same stores. And so this represented a whole different animal of I'm going to have different things. I'm going to have my local store actually have the right to go buy something, because oftentimes you can't even do centralized buying with local craft brews and those types of things. If I want my Confluence beer from down the road, I can't get that in Minneapolis. I may need to have people that are actually buying locally in order to fill the store. So the systems that I'm impacting are anything from assortment planning to the space and presentation stuff to in-store inventory types of tracking and so on. And so they're huge, but what this enabled us to do, or what enabled Target to do, I still feel like I'm a Target guy, I was there for 13 years. We basically were able to look across all those things and align those product teams on a shared vision of what we're trying to accomplish, the business outcomes that we were trying to go after, and then unleash them to figure out how best to go solve for that. And it's certainly not a perfect world. They've got their own bumps and bruises as well, but that enterprise view is absolutely critical. And then simplicity over complexity. Obviously, nobody's trying to make things complex, but we do it all the time, and especially in financial services. I worked at Wells for about 8 years, and I swore I would never go back to a bank. And then my boss at Target left and recruited me, and I said, the one thing I said to you, don't go to a bank. And here I am. But so we govern the people that govern things at the bank. And so I get compliance. You have to be compliant with things, but we can make it simpler than complex, and there are ways that we can do that. And then basically this is kind of these changes are not fast. This is not an overnight thing. When I think about changing how we work, I think about it in quarters and years. I don't think about it in weeks and months. And so it takes a special kind of masochist to do the work that we do. But basically, it's kind of slow and noticeable stuff. Sorry for like the total riff off slides, but that was basically really important stuff that I should have put in there in the first place. And then so when we start talking about these outcomes, like how do we actually get to outcomes? OKRs, this is your quick, Felipe Castro is the guy that kind of wrote this particular slide. But the objective is qualitative. It's the thing that gets you out of bed in the morning. It's human-centered. It's not a bullet point to say this is exactly what we will do from a business perspective and you will enjoy it. It's basically, hey, this is what, I'm going to go create this awesome customer experience. Like it's okay to have the word awesome in an objective. And then the KRs are all about just what specifically is going to change and how are we going to tell whether or not we succeeded. And that's what the KRs are all about. And then anybody up here in the first couple tables, what's absent from those objectives and key results that you would normally see when somebody asks you to do something? Yeah, timeline is one thing. What else? Initiative, yep, the work, right? How I'm going to do this is missing, which is a beautiful thing because it unlocks basically how you're actually going to how you can approach the problems that you're trying to solve. This one I'm going to basically skip over, but it's essentially, I just want you to be thinking if you start approaching the use of OKRs, or if you're having problems using OKRs today, it's a great quadrant to be able to kind of look at what types of metrics should I be looking at from day to day, and how do I balance them? If all I did was focus on customer satisfaction, I could go out of business really quickly. I could make people really, really happy. I could buy their business, so on and so forth. But ultimately, if they're not profitable, I'm not doing well. So you've got to manage value, satisfaction, stability, all those types of things together. If you're stuck in a spot where you're used to tracking activities, which is most of us, I'm one of them, it's okay. Like, that's fine. The fact that you already have ideas and that you have stuff that's in flight, that somebody has a project plan that's got 25 different things in it, that's fine. You can still shift the dialogue. And you can basically say, if all you have is the stuff on the left, bunch of different activities, your magic question for the day, this is my one gift to you, is why? And you can ask it on almost any topic, at almost any time, to almost anybody. I know sometimes it's more intimidating if they're really senior level people and you say why, because I told you to, those types of things. But then you can say, why did you tell me to? It actually keeps working. You've heard of the 5 whys probably. So these are just examples. If you've got a roadmap that says I'm going to update my checkout flow, why am I updating the checkout flow? Most likely, I'm trying to increase conversion from X to Y. If I'm implementing recommendations on a website, I'm probably trying to increase basket size and sell more crap. Amazon, Target, very, very, very good at it. If I'm updating a password reset flow, it could be because I've got a specific problem around the number of incidents that are coming in around that particular piece of functionality. If I want to automate an infra pipeline, I've never used that one before. It's just for you guys. I want to decrease my cycle time by X. All my business folks would look at that and go, what? You want to do what with your what? Stay away from me. Automate feedback loop. Basically, this one may be like, I don't know what my customers think of my products. I've never asked them. And it's frightening, but I get that a lot. Because I ask people, like, so what's the baseline for your customer satisfaction? And I don't know. It's like, okay, then can we at least get to a place where we can measure that? Let's start there. And then once we've measured it, how can we get an incremental, how can we show incremental progress, essentially? This one was, as I was building the deck, I was also watching some TV. So I was watching the giant beast that is the global economy on Amazon Prime. Great show, and a whole series of things. And so they were talking about AI, and they were showing us like scary robots and all that kind of stuff. But then they had this software tool that this guy had generated, and obviously AI is becoming more and more common. And I was just, honestly, the reason I was watching it is because the AI stuff was like, I still have yet to understand what the hell it actually is. So I want to sit down and actually have somebody tell me. And so this particular software company had an application that allowed multiple people to weigh in on any types of questions that were out there, and it became like a predictive capability. So they challenged themselves in 2016 to figure out the top 4 places of the Kentucky Derby, or top 4 finishers of the Kentucky Derby. So they had 20 different experts that all took input, or all gave input, and then the system basically generated the top 4. And they nailed it, or the system nailed it. When they looked at the 20 people as individuals, nobody nailed it. And the only thing that they would have done if they would have taken like a poll was that they would have gotten the winner right. But they didn't get the subsequent 4. The question that I had immediately after that is, why does this man still work? Because if he can do that, and it only took $20 to get 11,000, I'm seeing retirement in my future. That's just me. But I'm going back to the Crow. I'm going to have some fish, and it's all going to be good. But the parallel that I drew here, it's not just a completely random story, is I at least saw a parallel with collaborating across different skill sets. And so it works in artificial intelligence. It also works in real intelligence. Now, even if I can get to a point where I can confidently predict the winner, and not even the next 4, there's power in that collaborative exercise, right? And so that's where this opportunity canvas comes in. So Jeff Patton is the author of User Story Mapping. He's an awesome dude. He draws all of his presentations live. I don't know how he does it. He's a very, very smart product guy. And he introduced this opportunity canvas. And first thing, you look at it and you go, Jeff, are you sure you're smart? Because I don't think you can count. You've got 2 1s. What is this? Jeff is so smart that he knows that nobody ever asks for you to solve a problem. They always come and ask you to build a solution for something. And this is embarrassingly a real example that I've uncovered with a team recently. And so the solution idea was this chatbot. And the problem that they had was basically, hey, like 25% of the support calls that we have for this particular platform are password reset related. And I thought to myself, your first thought was chatbot. That's cool. So we stopped and we said, what problem are you actually trying to solve? And so the purpose of the canvas, I should have probably given you that as well, is to have a structured dialogue around a feature or set of features so that you understand why you're doing it. And so that a cross-functional team can look at it and they can all give you the same spiel back as to why they're doing it. The number of times that I talk to developers and ask them, why are you building what you're building? They told me to build it. I don't know. I'm doing my freaking job. What do you want from me? So the problems that they're really trying to solve is that the password reset process was too hard. They had some user error. The challenge questions were kind of tough for people to understand. And the reason they were tough to understand or to remember were that they had really occasional users on this particular function. This is like a treasury management kind of thing. And they do some quarterly processes. So you set up your ID and then you just forget about it because it's not something that you're using every day. And so let's see here. And what's happening basically in the room as I'm putting these sticky notes up here is that there's just a cross-functional team having a discussion. I'm facilitating that dialogue. I've got sticky notes. I'm just jotting stuff down as I hear it, and I'm slapping it up on the wall, and then I'll pause them and say, hey, this is what I heard, and then walk them through what's up on the board, and then we just kind of keep going. So that's why you've got these iterative steps of things being added. And notice that they're not necessarily all being added in order, and that's fine. Like this is not some big structured, overly expensive process. This is probably a 25-minute dialogue for a set of features. So we start talking through, oh yeah, we've also got some other customers that use it. They use it all the time. How do they solve for this thing today? Either they know how to change a password, or they talk to their admin locally, or they call the bank and actually try to have something changed that way. The value I should have mentioned there is basically we're thinking from a customer perspective. There's nothing that pisses me off more than not remembering my frickin' password, and I do it all the time. I swear, the older I get, the less I can remember. I try using the same one, and then they say, no, you can't use that one because you used it 2 months ago. Frustrating. So they're frustrating too, and ultimately they're just trying to save time for themselves and be happy. And then we start looking at different ways that we could actually measure success here. On the business side, when we said, hey, 25% of our incidents come in from this thing, we can measure improvements to that. We can say, okay, how many do we have now? And how much does it cost to have one of these incidents show up? And so you can actually do the math on how much this particular problem is costing you, at least generally speaking. I'm not trying to build like a cohesive, like a big business case like we have in the past. This is a 25-minute discussion, get me directional guidance on where I want to go, and make sure everybody understands what the heck I'm doing. So the user metrics deal here is basically, hey, actually the system does measure if they succeed or not, because we have to do that in order to toss them through a very painful process. So let's measure that. And then figure that out. And then, meanwhile, they're also starting to brainstorm other solution ideas, like what about SMS and what about email, and starting to look at which business metrics we can use. Adoption is pretty easy for a password reset. The kind of budgeting wasn't too hard either, and we had kind of concrete dollars that we could use. The last sticky on here is the one that was my favorite, actually. It's like, who's already solved for this thing? Like, password reset is not a place that we need to innovate. We don't need to come up with some brand new way to do this. So for this particular discussion, it's a really simple example, but honestly, they had like 2 different next steps, and the first thing was basically to talk to some peers that have a platform that doesn't produce 25% of your problems with password reset. So, but for demonstrating kind of how the discussion works, hopefully the example rings true for you on how you could take something from your world where somebody has just come to you and said, go build X, and you don't understand why yet, to basically ask those questions in a structured way that then allows you to compare things to each other, not in some overblown process, but in a way that it basically is practical and allows you to have some really good cross-functional discussion. The brainstorming stuff, the reason you start with a chatbot and some other unique thing is that some business person has been challenged to, you will now be innovative, go make a difference, go separate ourselves from the market. So they're not trying to be stupid, they're not trying to be, they're not trying to make you do something that doesn't make any sense. They're just trying to do their job and trying to figure out how to differentiate themselves from somebody else. And we're all human, and we're all wrong 2/3 of the time. So as much as I'm kind of laughing at them, they laughed at themselves in the moment by the time we looked at the rest of the option. And so it actually builds team as you kind of talk through it. So I'm hoping that you guys can leverage that if you've never done that before. For these checklist people that are out there, and there's so many because we're human and we just want to know how to do our jobs well, I basically, the way that I describe it is remove all the sharp objects from the room. And so sharp objects for me are things that will make them behave like they've always behaved and not encourage them to behave in new ways. So I keep on doing this capitalization and lowercase e. I hope that all of you are catching on to the fact that I'm not a safe fan. And that ultimately the reason I'm not a safe fan is not because safe is inherently a bad thing. Logically, it actually fits together really well. Like I used that playbook that I created for Target, or I helped create for Target. I try to not to take 100% of the credit for that one. I mean, the whole concept with that is when I looked for inspiration on how to do this stuff, IBM had a product playbook or a UX playbook. The city of New York had a design playbook. I worked with Jeff on a couple other examples that he showed me. But SAFE was one of those inspirational things to me that's like, hey, here's one picture I can click on anything, and it tells me what it is and how it works, and it can get me to templates. It's like, hey, that's kind of cool. And honestly, I think that's half the reason the thing is as pervasive as it is in enterprises, is that, oh, it looks like it's a clean box. I can click on things. This is cool. And it takes away all the angst of, well, shit, if I can't control everybody, what am I going to do? I need a framework that can control them. That would be awesome. So if I've got people that are truly product-minded people, this is kind of it's not going to happen, but if I've got truly product-minded people and they want to use SAFe, I would say go for it. Like if you're thinking about discovery and doing discovery work across a bunch of different teams so that you could learn together and then go deliver together in an organized way, rock on, SAFe, you're awesome. But if you're using it because you're used to program management and you're used to writing reports or status reports for senior executives, throw the thing out. Because you're not it's just like doing financing, it's the wrong financial approach, right? It's like funding projects. It's a contradictory mindset to where we're trying to go and what we're trying to build. And then same thing with like new jobs without changing any incentives for how they work. If I take all my business analysts and make them product owners, and I take all my project managers and make them scrum masters, and all I do is switch titles and then have them try to work with the same people tomorrow, it's not going to work well. It can happen. You can't just fire your whole workforce and hire brand new talent. But you've got to be really, really careful with how you talk to them about their new job. What does success look like? What does doing well as a PO look like versus what does doing well as a BA look like? What does doing well as a Scrum Master look like versus what it looked like in the old days with project management? How servant leadership and cross-team work and collaboration somehow mapped perfectly to project managers, I will never know. I very rarely understand how people get put into some of those jobs, just because if you've got a PMP certification, I think you're unqualified for Scrum Mastering. And maybe that's too blunt and it's probably too broad. But man, the number of people that haven't embraced the mindset that then just try to go do the job is too many to count. And it slows us down. See constant improvement. So I think I actually saw on the program later, I don't know if I think it's tomorrow, somebody is talking about value streams and trying to continually improve how you're doing what you're doing and making the work that you're doing visible. And so I want to go to that session myself, but this is the kind of stuff that I'm doing now with teams that have been quote unquote agile for over a year. And I giggle a little bit because if you actually look at the details of this flow, they're getting a feature through their process in about 5 or 6 months, which looks a lot like waterfall or worse. But basically the beauty of this process is all I'm doing here is mapping out 3 things. That the middle blue section are all the activities that take place from the time that I receive a request or I have an idea to the time that I actually release it. And I'm not documenting perfect world, I'm not documenting what I'd like it to be, I'm just documenting what we actually do today. And the number of times that people do this is way too few, because if you don't do it, you don't have true visibility to where you're having problems and where you can actually improve. And doing it takes like an hour, literally. This particular diagram was done in 1 hour with 2 coaches, the Scrum team that we were working with on this particular one, and we were distributed. So the reason that it's a PowerPoint is that literally we were building it on the fly. I had them do a 5-minute exercise with sticky notes at their desks, wherever they were. I think we had 5 different states represented. That's another thing. US Bank, we're going to stand up Agile principles, but we have everybody working from home across the company. It's absolutely nuts. There isn't a single phone call that I'm on that doesn't have 2 or 3 states represented. So I thought Target was distributed, and all of the problems that we had with distributed teams at Target. We had people in Minneapolis, San Francisco, and Bangalore. That feels so luxurious right now. I'm trying to figure out how to get these teams to work together. But we're figuring it out. It's actually doable. Like, I'm kind of shocked. Like, there will be a presentation within the next year that I build just around changing my mindset on how to coach, and that I don't have to have you in the room to actually coach. So super fun stuff. But in any case, end-to-end flow. The yellow stuff is approximate timing that it's taking to do those tasks in today's world. The green stuff is who's involved down below. And then the little red diamonds are all about the anti-patterns that we're seeing. And this is probably like a subset of what could be 20 different things. But what it became was, it wasn't a bashing session with the team. They know that this isn't the way it should work. They know that this is painful in ways that it shouldn't be. So we basically just forced the dialogue and said, let's slap this thing on your wall. Let's pick the most important thing or the most painful thing that you have, and let's figure out how to fix it. And we're going to check that one off the box, and then we're going to do the next one. And it's all going to be kind of in tandem with you actually having to get work done as well. So you can't just stop everything that you're doing and fix your process. You have to keep working. But I do want you to dedicate like 20% of your life to fixing your process over time. And so this is a super powerful tool. If you've never done it, I would highly suggest it for any teams that you're working on. Even if you're working well, you're not working perfectly. And so this is something that just allows you to keep it front and center the entire time. Use coaches. I always talk about there are enterprises that get to a place where they're working pretty well, and then they stop and say, well, I guess we probably don't need coaching anymore because we're pretty good. And my comment is always kind of the Patriots example, right? So if the Patriots won the Super Bowl, what do you think they do? Do they fire their coach because they got him there, or he got him there? No, you keep going, you keep improving, you keep evolving. Life keeps changing around us. And coaching is not just product and Agile, it's software engineering coaches. So a couple of my old teammates are going to be presenting, I think, in the next session. I don't know if they're going as the Bobbies or the Bobs, but one is Bobby and the other one is Bob. They are awesome software engineering coaches at Target. And we don't have this type of talent yet at the bank, and it's absolutely critical to support standing up DevOps as both a culture and as the tactical approaches to kind of change how we implement. So they're going to be talking about product governance and changing that word to guidance as opposed to governance. So if you're at all interested in that, they're great. They're funnier than I am, smarter than I am, and fun to watch. So go check them out. But this one hopefully is clear. For you guys, what I want to implore you to do are just a couple basic things. These are probably the weirdest takeaways that you'll ever get from a DevOps keynote. But start with the mirror. So I've covered a few different topics today. I want you to take one of those things with you back to your teams, ideally. And also, whether it be mindset, whether it be a tactical thing, I'm hoping that you have at least one thing that you can walk away with. The second one, as I said earlier, is just ask why all the time and make it part of your culture. And you can have fun with it. There was a time when I was working at Target where we were on a product team that was basically struggling because we kind of took over a platform that had a lot of problems. And so when we were trying to prioritize and so on, we were still kind of the old mindset of trying to figure out more kind of concrete business cases, but a lot of folks didn't know how to do it. They were just kind of saying, hey, emotionally, this thing is the most important thing. We did things like creating a BS button on the table that was invisible. Anybody could hit the BS button. You start going down an emotional path, BS. There's no reason for us to take that thing forward. And it was a blast. It was actually hilarious because by the time we were all said and done, we trusted each other. We were holding each other accountable, making each other better. So in any case, ask why all the time. And then watch TV, probably the only time you've ever been told to watch TV. This Brene Brown thing, she did this I was so disappointed, actually. I watched the special, and I'm like, dude, I've seen this whole presentation. She came to Target. Like this, I've already seen this. But it's an awesome presentation. So basically, she is how many of you have heard of her? Probably about half, not even. So she is... Talk about a bad job title. She is a researcher on shame and, what was the other one? She always talks about vulnerability, but it was shame and something else. Really not, like the thing that you would not believe Netflix would do a special on, right? Like this person certainly does not have special material, but she does. She talks a lot about courage, and then everything that she talks about, number one, she's hilarious, she's down to earth, she swears a little bit, and the stuff that she talks about is just applicable regardless of whether or not it's in an Agile team or your personal life or anything else. And honestly, I don't know that I've got another hour's worth of content that fits all the crap we deal with from day to day on our teams as much as this thing. So by all means, please go check her out if you've got Netflix. These last two are just two different things. One is Stuff I want you to read, I'll leave that one up last, just so that you can, if you want to take a picture or something, you can. I always try to take pictures of books, and then the slide's gone before it's there. As I said earlier, I'm not an expert in anything. I've had a lot of fun experiences. I've had a lot of cool opportunities to connect with people. The other thing I want to invite you to do is just reflect on your own career and your own points of view in your area of expertise in your domain, and take some time to actually document it, and maybe even say thank you to some of those folks that are influential for you. So for me, these were kind of my, Donald Miller is an author, talks about the idea, and it was actually somebody's idea, I think, but talks about the concept of, we become like the people that we hang around in about a 5-year period. So that like the 5 people that you hang out with the most over a 5-year period basically have the biggest impact on who we become as individuals. And so I just took some time trying to document, what's my point of view on product in general, right? So that's all the stuff on the left. That's all just my brain dump on what I think about product as a whole, and really probably a better summary of my presentation than the last slide I gave you. And then the other ones are just folks that I've had direct interactions with, have done life with, have done work with, and that have just had a huge impact on me and enabled me to learn more. And I defer like anything that I know kind of back to them as far as a thank you for getting to learn it. And so I'll just leave it at that for now. But these are also great folks to go check out their writings, check out their videos, those types of things. Sarah doesn't have a lot of stuff online, but she's an excellent product person. And now she's working for a little startup. And then the stuff that I'd love to see you guys reading, regardless of what role you're in, are these, and I'll tell you why. Inspired basically is kind of the product management Bible for anybody that's first getting into product. Go pick up that book and check it out. User story mapping, basically if you want to do value stream work, if you want to map out a user experience from end to end, this is your book and your guy, super practical, that's Jeff Patton. Sense and Respond, if you've got leaders that you need that are interested, but they're still behaving in old ways, Sense and Respond is a great book to give to them. And I have gifted many a book. I've also gifted book reports, is what I call them. I will summarize a book in a few slides, because giving a book to somebody is like giving them a sentence to spend 3 days doing what you want them to. Feels kind of like a weird controlling gift if they don't receive it well. So sometimes I'll summarize those books for them and then give them the book next to it and say, if you want to read it, great. If not, it's okay. It's only $12. Lean Customer Development, Cindy Alvarez, she's a researcher at Microsoft. Great book for introducing yourself to, how do I interview customers? How do I make sure that I'm actually, instead of just saying, hey, I built you this thing, what do you think? That's not an interview. That's asking for approval. So the interview is basically saying, tell me what problems you're solving. Give me context for the problem space that I'm working in. Those types of things. Great book. Project to Product, pretty self-explanatory title. That one's a little bit more dense, but if you're in an Agile Transformation type of office, that's one that you need to absorb. This is Marketing by Seth, is really, I don't think it's about marketing at all, personally. I think it's about the product mindset. And I absolutely love it. Gives me, and I actually have gone back and reread it. I've got a picture on Instagram that has all these little colored tabs sticking out the side, and it's obscene how many little quotes you can pull from Seth. But it's an awesome mindset book. For those of you that aren't using OKRs but want to learn more about them, Radical Focus is about a 2.5-hour read. I don't read that quickly, and it took me about 2.5 hours. And it does a great job of summarizing OKRs and kind of how to use them. And then my boss is in love with this Team of Teams book, so it's always on my list. But honestly, it's just to give her the tip of the cap, because it's a really dense book. But if you're thinking about large-scale problems, like enterprise issues, a bunch of teams having to work together, it really is a solid book. It talks about how it draws parallels with the military and how they function and how you basically empower at different levels and so on and so forth. So really good stuff. And then when you get this presentation, I think it'll be on the website as soon as I give it to them. And I'll probably do it in a PDF so it doesn't blow up somebody's PC like mine did. And basically be able to, there's just a bunch of different websites for product information, product management concepts. Mind the Product is awesome. You don't have to spend the $900 to go to their conference, because 6 months after the conference is done, they publish all the videos anyway. and literally you're just sitting there. You get to meet some people, but if you need to save money on flights to San Francisco, then just wait and go to their website. And that is, I believe, the end of what I got for you. Thank you for paying attention, and thank you for having me. Hopefully it helps. Thank you.